Salvete, veitores, and welcome back to Let's Translate Eutropius Breviarium Historiae Romanae ab orbe condita. This series is me translating through a Latin text, not only showing what it's saying, but also explaining some of the grammar behind it. Mostly to improve my own Latin. Today we start Book 2. But first, just a quick recap of Book 1.
Rome was founded. Romulus did cool things. Kings happened. Some were bad, some good. All died. Then Rome became a republic. Fought a bunch of people. Cincinnatus was cool. Decemvirs replaced consuls. Consuls are back. Rome was captured by Gauls. Camillus was cool. The end. Got it? Good. On to Book 2. So, anno trecentesimo sexagesimo quinto ab orbe condita. Anno trecentesimo sexagesimo quinto being ablative of time when. I may have, in the previous book, said that this kind of thing was ablative absolute. That's not really it, because an ablative absolute needs both a noun and a participle. And this does not have a participle. And since it's just describing when the thing is happening, it's just ablative of time when. So, in the 365th year, ab orbe condita, something we have seen many times before, from the founding of the city, which should be about, 388 BCE? Yeah. Though, Livy says that the event that's going to be described here happened about in the 310th year from the founding, which would be about 443 BCE. Which is quite a big difference. I don't know how there's such a big difference between the two, since Eutropius is using Livy as a source. But figuring that out is a bit above my pay grade. So let's move on. So in the 365th year from the founding of the city, post captum autem primo, post captum, another prepositional phrase, after the capture, or after its capture, since it's the capture of Rome by the Senones, a tribe of Gauls. Autem, furthermore, which you don't need to translate. It's a conjunction that is like furthermore or however, but it's used far more often in Latin than those conjunctions are in English. So just when seeing autem, just use discretion about whether you want to include it in your translation or not. Primo, an adverb for first. So like, after its capture, first, like the first thing that happens after its capture, dignitates mutatis sunt. So dignitates is our subject, because it's nominative plural, and mutatis sunt, perfect passive participle, which we have already seen plenty of in the previous book, and we're going to see a lot more. And going through these next several chapters, I realized, Eutropius is fantastic for just getting it rammed into your brain what perfect passive participles look like and what to do with them. So, if you need practice, just translate Eutropius. So, dignitates, like dignitaries or public officials, mutatis sunt are changed, or were changed, really, because perfect. So, like, the officials were changed. Et pro duobus consulibus. Pro is, like, honestly, it usually is for something, like, when someone does something pro bono, for the good, just for the good of the thing. But here it is instead of, as the context will reveal in just a moment. So instead of two consuls, facti tribuni militares consulari potestate. Tribuni militares is our subject. Consulari potestate. And this is ablative. Both of these are ablative. Actually, no. I think, yeah, consulari is the adjective, modifying potestate. So, military tribunes with consular power. Facti are made. Another perfect passive participle, just without the form of est, for some reason. I guess just because it's implied. You know it's there. So instead of 2 consuls, military tribunes with consular power are created or made. And now this is the second time the Romans have done something like this. And don't worry, like, the military, this isn't a completely new thing. The military tribunes already had, like, they already existed. They just didn't have the power of the consuls. And, like, they were mainly meant to lead armies. Originally, there were, like, 3, I think, to lead each legion. And eventually there were more as the Roman army grew. But at this point, they're, helping to lead the legions. But this whole thing came about mainly because of the conflict of the orders. The orders being the plebeians and the patricians. The plebeians, I feel like probably was mentioned in the last book, but I don't remember. The plebeians have been vying for power forever. And the patricians just don't want them to have more power. But at this point, the patricians and the Senate and consuls were like, okay, fine. We'll replace the consuls with military tribunes that have the same powers as the consuls. Okay, fine. And this was for the plebeians to have more power, but in the first election, it was all patricians that were elected to be, like, consular tribunes. I don't know how you mess that up. But, and that would be a running theme with the military tribunes. You can get a more detailed rundown in Livy, which will probably be somewhere below on the screen now. So, with military tribunes leading the state instead of consuls, hinc iam coipit Romana res crescere. Here, now, 2 adverbs right back to back, and it's kind of the iam, or just having both hinc and iam is kind of superfluous in my opinion. So if you choose, you can just not include one of those. I'd probably not include iam if I were to just leave out one of those in the translation, but you can use both or just one of them. Just make sure to have one of them in your translation, I'd say. Coipit is our main verb to begin. Romana res, Romana modifying res, and res oftentimes can mean the state, like with res publica, the public state or matter, whatever. I like translating it as matter or thing a lot of the time, just because when you say thing, it's funny. It's just with my sense of humor, it's just like, it's a public thing. It's a Roman thing. But here, as well as in most of Livy, they use it for the state. So we're going to translate the Roman state. Coipit, began, crescere, to rise, to ascend. So here, now, the Roman state began to rise, like in power. I don't know if you can hear all the rustling, but that's my rats just going about their business. I've got them out right now. They're all good boys. Moving on. Nam Camillus eo anno volscorum civitatum, quae per septuaginta annos bellum gesserat, wicket. So, Nam, 4. Camillus, who was the cool guy from last chapter, eo anno, in the same year, or in that year, basically. Another ablative of time when, rather than ablative absolute. I've run into this trap lately that whenever it's just a bunch of ablatives in a row, I assume it's an ablative absolute. And that works a lot of the time, but when it's like this, you still got to pay attention for the participle. Otherwise, just in this context, it's ablative of time when. Volscorum civitatem. Civitatem is our object. The city, so Camillus, the city of the Volsci, and I think it's probably clear by what Camillus does and what the Romans do what's going to happen to the city, but we'll continue on. Quae, relative pronoun, therefore a relative clause. Per, a prepositional phrase, Septuaginta annos, and bellum is a different case, or really a different number, so we're going to close that. And also that's the object of the phrase, of the clause, the relative clause. Gesserat, the verb of the clause, and the comma here tells us that that's the end, but seeing another verb right after it without the punctuation ought to tell you, oh, the relative clause is ended. Plus, wicket is our main verb of this clause, of like the main clause. So for Camillus, let's just not include the relative clause first. For Camillus, in that year, in this year, in the same year, conquered the city of the Wolski. Quae, since this is nominative feminine singular, specifically because it's feminine, it has to agree with civitatem. So it has to be referring back. It's relative to the city. So, which had waged, this is pluperfect, the erat tells you it's pluperfect, war, like throughout or for 70 years. So for Camillus, in that year, conquered the city of the Wolski, which had waged war throughout, like, for 70 years. Yeah, for 70 years is the most normal English way to say this. Et aequorum urbem et suterrinorum atque omnibus deletes earundem exercitibus occupavit, et tres simul triumphos egit. Now, I was tempted to just do and for this et, but then a second et, just a little later, tells you it should probably be both and. Both and. So, both aequorum orbem, the city of the Aequi, et suterrinorum, of the Suterini. So both the city of the Aequi and Suterini, which I don't think they shared the same city, so saying both the city of the Aequi and Suterini sounds like they're kind of sharing the city. It's a little more ambiguous. You could make the argument that also can say that like they're separate cities of separate peoples. But to more explicitly put it that way, I'm going to say both the city of the Aequi and the city of the Suterini. Atque and omnibus deletis earundem executibus occupavit. So and omnibus deletis earundem executibus, this is an adlative absolute. You have executibus as the subject, not subject, noun as the noun, and deletis as the participle. Most of these are the ablative, so you got an ablative absolute. Earundem is genitive plural, though, and it is modifying executibus. Their, or the same people's, army, or armies, I guess. Yeah, it's plural, so armies, or all their armies having been deleted? Or with after their armies were destroyed. Hold on, let me just quickly. Just quickly slow down. Most literal translation: with their armies, with all their armies destroyed. Occupavit, the main verb, he occupied that. So it's a Latin in its word order is so weird. Though I guess to them, English word order is weird. But to put it into correct order, I think the ablative absolute would go well first. After all their armies were destroyed, he occupied, he being Camillus, he's still the subject of the sentence, both the city of the Aequi and the city of the Sutrini. And et tres simul triumphos egit. Egit, our verb, triumphos, our object. And tres just goes with triumphos. I don't see how you could miss that. Simul, an adverb, can mean simultaneous, as we get the word from it, or at the same time. But here it's actually like one after the other. So, and he had held 3 triumphs, one after the other. Or even back to back. Just, they were happening very close to each other in time. And there is chapter 1 of book 2. And now to put it all together, a Latin reading and an English reading. Anno trecentesimo sexagesimo quinto ab urbe condita, post captam autem primo, dignitates mutates sunt, et pro duobus consulibus, facti tribuni militares consulari potestate. Hinc iam coipet Romana res crescere. Nam Camillus, eo anno volscorum civitatem, quae per septuaginta annos bellum gesserat, vicit, et aequorum urbem, et sutrinorum, atque omnibus deletis earundem exercitibus, occupavit, et tres simul triumphos egit.
In the 365th year from the founding of the city, and the first after its capture, public officials were changed, and instead of 2 consuls, military tribunes with consular power were made. Now henceforth the Roman state began to rise. For Camillus in the same year conquered the city of the Volsci, which had waged war for 70 years. And he occupied both the city of the Aequi and the city of the Sutrini, after he destroyed all of their armies. And he held 3 triumphs back to back. Next time, the Praeneste attack again. It's not the most interesting chapter content-wise, but I do clear up a bit of a vocab issue I've had with one specific word. A lot. So, see you all then. Valete, Veatores.